we make an emotional shift, let's say we go from frustration to joy, those kind of emotional shifts, about 1,400 biochemical changes instantly go off in the body. Now, if you think about the course of one day, all the emotions that we feel, the highs and the lows, and the myriad of emotional textures that occur through our perceptions during a day, you can see that emotions are creating lots and lots of changes in our physiology. So it makes a lot of sense to start paying attention to the emotional diet as well as to the physical diet. That's one of the keys to better health and certainly to slowing down the aging process. Strong negative emotions just degenerate us. Positive emotional states regenerate us. Become simple math. Feel more love, more care, more appreciation, and your health's got a better chance of improving and staying that way.
One of the most profound discoveries made really since the advent of quantum physics is a thing called the zero-point field. And what this is the energy exchange that goes on between subatomic particles. All subatomic particles engage in a little energy dance. It's almost like playing a game of basketball. They send energy back and forth to each other. And in that exchange, a thing called a virtual particle is created, just for less than the blink of an eye. Now, that little individual exchange isn't much energy. It's about a half a watt's worth. But when you multiply all of the subatomic particles doing this energy exchange across all things in all the universe, you come up with this unfathomable amount of energy, all happening out there in empty space, like some supercharged backdrop.
While conventional biology focuses on the material stimuli, quantum physics reveals that it's the invisible stimuli that are much more important. There's a simple quote by Albert Einstein that makes sense out of this, and the quote is, "The field is the sole governing agency of the particle." What Einstein meant by this very simply is the field, the invisible energy forces around us, they are the sole governing agencies of the particle. Well, the particles matter. And so quantum physics says the character of matter is ultimately determined by the field.
How then is healing communicated to another person? Well, you see, there's this field. We're not in this field, we are this field. We're denser, we're lighter in between, we're denser, we're lighter in between, or some people say we're lighter when we're physical form and we're denser in between. Whatever the aspect is, we're blips in this field of energy, of light, of information. We access this field all the time. We pull information from this field all the time.
Every one of us has watched a flock of birds in flight and how it changes direction. Instantly, all birds in the flock change direction. So it seems as if a superior bird brain controls all the birds simultaneously. That only works with the help of those fields, since the fields are able to transfer with no informational loss, and above all, instantaneously, with no time delay.
Walk into any great cathedral in the United States, in Europe, anywhere, that's been standing for hundreds of years or more. And what you will experience is in that cathedral is a hush of awe, reverence, quiet, and it's a palpable experience. Why is that true? It is true because for hundreds of years, the people going into that cathedral have been on their best behavior. They have been in awe and worshipful and in a state of mind that the quantum emissions from the body-brain are emitted into that cathedral, absorbed into that cathedral, and fed back in later centuries to the participants coming into it. And that's why they feel a sense of hush, awe, and reverence.
We're all part of this giant energy field, this zero-point field, that we're all connected, and that we're connected across the furthest reaches of the cosmos.
Watch an ice skater. There are things that they can do that are not describable. in terms of nerve impulses. Nerve impulses and chemical reactions are too slow to explain the subtleties of life.
Even now, if you look up the textbooks in psychology, in medicine or biology, and try to find out how the nervous system works, you're confronted with the discontinuity of the system.
The nervous system is comprised of neuron cells that carry electrical and chemical impulses throughout the body.
If you measure the impulses of the nervous system, we get some of them going at 200 miles an hour, whereas other of them going at 2 miles an hour, and I think those of the pain reflexes are very slow. How on earth the brain or any other part of the body can coordinate the nervous system and your very fine movements when these impulses are supposed to be travelling at many different speeds is just an impossible problem. If you're a dancer, for example, we're moving in 3 dimensions and you're moving in time. How on earth that person can coordinate all of these important dance steps is quite a mystery. This seems to be impossible with the contemporary model of the nervous system. We need a field theory to explain how the nervous system in all its complexity can coordinate everything that happens in the body.
We now know when you study nervous system activity that the brain can start firing synchronous pulses throughout different areas of the brain virtually instantaneously. The significance of these coherence of these pulses that begin to fire when actually consciousness is functioning is when scientists looked at how fast you could coordinate all these different areas that were focusing at the same time, that the coherence of the firing was faster than the physical ability of cells to communicate from one area to the other. So basically, these results reveal that the brain is communicating on a higher level than through the physical transmission of nerves.
Our brains also don't work the way we were taught in school. Learning isn't here, memory isn't here, speech isn't here, this isn't there, this isn't somewhere else. These aspects are diffuse throughout our brains, and we access it from the field. So it's as if there's this bandwidth of information that we're always in tune with, although not always consciously.
We're understanding that the brain doesn't have precise addresses for certain things. No one's been able to find where memory is, for instance. And Carl Pribram did some amazing studies years ago, horrible studies, where they taught rats certain runs and then began systematically destroying the rats' brains. And they found that no matter how much of the brain they removed, the rats might have terrible motor skills from that, but they would still, over and over, remember the run. And from that, Pribram understood that you couldn't say that memory has one precise address, that it's much more delocalized. And in fact, most radically, that memory might not exist inside the skull at all, but maybe somewhere out here in the field. And so what you have instead of this localized, centralized system is much more of a paradigm where the body is an interaction. It's not something that ends here, it's something that ends out here. And that we have an interaction taking place between us and our environment, us and the field at every moment.
I had an irregularity on a kidney that was discovered by an MRI. The physicians wanted to biopsy that, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. And I had a healer, Adam, a young man in Vancouver, who was developing his talents as a healer. He wanted to work on it. Over a period of a month, we did that once a week.
Using just a photograph, Adam can perceive a person's body field in the form of a holographic image. He sees areas where the energy flow is blocked, which indicates illness or injury. Through his intention to heal, he manipulates energy and information to clear these blockages, allowing the body to change.
I went back and had a sonogram made of that a month after diagnosis. The radiologist examined the data and said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, but the irregularity in the kidney is smaller and disappearing. Went back 3 months after that, and later in 2003, after that, where the total healing period had been less than 6 months, and again had sonogram, and it was totally gone. Everything was regular again. Nearly all of the healings that I have worked with have been remote or at a distance, and it doesn't seem to make, the distance seems to have no effect at all, which would again suggest we're dealing with a quantum phenomena. The healer was in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was in Florida, the longest distance across the United States. So I've continued then to experiment with different healing modes for different things with different people. But the mechanism is always the same. There's information being transferred, and there seems to be an energy transfer as well that's palpable.
It now appears that our bodies are connected to the field, but what is the mechanism for this intercommunication? How can this connection take place? One possible solution: the biophoton. Biophotons are weak emissions of light emanating from the cells of all living things.
We know we're sending out information with biophoton emissions because people like Fritz Popp have discovered that we are sending out tiny currents of light.
We started to look for these photons. I knew from the beginning on that it must not be very high intensity, but it was clear that one should have these photons at all in a cell.
In order to detect the biophotons, Professor Popp and his students needed a photomultiplier that was so sensitive it could see a candle over 12 miles away. When a living organism is placed in front of the photon detector, light emitting from the cells can be observed.
We started with cucumber seedlings and later with other ones, and all living systems which we put into the instrument showed this very weak photon emission.
Professor Popp theorizes that these biophoton emissions may be controlling our body's metabolism.
Molecules cannot regulate themselves. They have to have a field, more or less. So the photons should be the carrier of the information which is necessary to regulate the metabolism.
These biophotons create a dynamic, coherent web of light within our bodies. Our bodies are constantly emitting light in the form of biophotons. Are these biophotons the body's control mechanism? Isn't that the function of our DNA, our genes?
Genes are not controlling our biology. When we get issues running in families, for example, cancer, we immediately look at a genealogy chart and mark all the recipients of this cancer running through the family, and then turn around and say, look, genetics, this is running in the family, so there must be cancer genes. What they've left out is this very interesting piece of research that reveals that when children are adopted into families that have cancer, the adopted children will express the cancer with the same propensity as any natural child in that family. But the interesting fact is the child comes from totally different genetics that doesn't even have that cancer. So it says being introduced into the family dynamics, which is where you learn perceptions and beliefs and attitudes, is what shapes the cancer, not the genetics.